From Godfathers to Goodfellas, we love a good mafia movie. But how does their brand of justice stack up against the real thing? Let's start with the most basic. How do they dispense it? In the movies, mafia justice is brutal but fair. The punishment fits the crime. A disobedient soldier gets whacked. A rival family is taken out in a gang war. When someone crosses the mafia, they're made an offer they can't refuse, usually involving concrete shoes and a harbor. But that's not how justice works. You can't just kill people because you don't like them, or because they did something you don't approve of. It's called murder, not justice, and it's illegal. In the real world, there's such a thing as due process. Even mobsters have rights. They can't just be taken out by a hit squad without any trial or charges being filed. Now, you might be thinking that the mafia is unbound by the same rules as the rest of us, and you'd be right. They operate outside the law. But even so, they still have to follow their own rules. The mafia has its own constitution, a set of laws and customs that govern how the organization operates. It's called the omerta, and it's based on ancient Sicilian traditions. The omerta prohibits killing a fellow member without the permission of the family's leader. So if one of the 5 families catches wind that you killed one of their guys, they can declare war on you. This happened to Bonanno crime family Caporeg Joseph Massino. He got himself whacked because he was cooperating with the feds. But before he got killed, he testified against his fellow mobsters. In court, prosecutors told the jury that this wasn't unusual behavior for the mafia. If you snitch on your friends in the mob, you get killed. That's just how things work. In fact, snitching is considered one of the worst things you can do in the mafia. It's called ratting, and it's punishable by death. To avoid any suspicion of ratting, mobsters often lie to investigators, even implicating innocent people just to protect themselves. In one case, a mobster named Anthony Gaspib Casso implicated a state trooper in a murder. Only later did investigators find out that Casso had made the whole thing up. He just didn't want to go to prison for life. To avoid that fate, he was willing to say anything, no matter how outlandish. But in the end, it didn't matter. The state trooper he accused was never charged with the murder, and Casso was convicted on perjury charges. His lie sent him down for 15 years. Casso was hardly the first mobster to try and weasel his way out of prison, and he probably won't be the last either. But the point is, even when the mafia has all the evidence they need to nail a guy, they still have to follow the rules. Due process and all that jazz. You can't just kill people whenever they feel like it. They have to make sure they have a good reason and a solid case against them. Otherwise, they could end up in prison themselves. But what about the punishments they hand out? Are those more lenient than the punishments handed out by the justice system? It depends. In the movies, the mafia is always doling out gruesome punishments. Guys get buried alive, drowned, burned alive, dissolved in acid. Sometimes they just get whacked over the head with a baseball bat until they're dead. But in real life, the punishments aren't quite so dramatic. Sure, there are cases where mobsters have been found guilty of torturing people. But that's not really how the mafia operates. They're not some kind of medieval torture chamber. They're a criminal organization. They're in it for the money. And torture is just a waste of time. It doesn't make them any money. And it can actually make them a lot of enemies. Think about it. If you torture someone and then kill them, who's going to find out? Their family and friends. What if those people want revenge? Torturing someone doesn't exactly keep a low profile. It makes the victim's loved ones desperate for vengeance. On top of that, torture takes time. And the mafia doesn't have a lot of it to spare. They're busy running their criminal empire. They don't have time to mess around with torturing people. Plus, there's a good chance the victim will die anyway. Why waste all the time and energy on torture when you can just whack the guy and be done with it? In many ways, the mafia is a lot like the justice system. They both dispense punishments, albeit selectively. But unlike the justice system, the mafia doesn't have to worry about public opinion. They can do whatever they want, and no one's going to stop them, except maybe the FBI. But that's another story. What do you think? Mafia justice more fair than our justice system? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See you next time. One of the reasons why mafia justice is so popular in the movies is because it's simple. There's no due process, no appeals, no trials. If you're guilty, you're punished. End of story. But is that really so appealing? Does anyone really want to live in a world where they could be killed without a trial? Well, apparently some people do. Just ask anyone from New York City. In the 1930s and 40s, people were clamoring for the Mafia to take over the city. They were tired of the corruption and the crime, and they thought the Mafia could do a better job. And for a while it looked like they might be right. They cracked down on crime and corruption, and for a while it seemed like New York might be a better place to live. Of course, that didn't last. The Mafia isn't some kind of magical crime-fighting organization. They're just a bunch of thugs with guns. But still, it makes you wonder why people wanted them to take over in the first place. Why did they want to live under a dictatorship? Well, it has to do with the appeal of simplicity. People were tired of the complexities of the justice system. They wanted a simpler, more direct approach to crime and punishment, and the Mafia offered that. They promised to clean up the streets and punish criminals swiftly and effectively. Of course, that never happened. But it does explain why the Mafia has such a strong appeal in popular culture. We love the idea of a powerful, ruthless organization taking over and restoring order to a chaotic world. It's appealing because it's simple. Unfortunately, the real world isn't so simple. The Mafia may be able to operate outside the law, but they still have to follow some kind of code. They can't just kill people whenever they feel like it. They have to have a reason, a motive, a cause, and even then they have to be careful. One wrong move and they could end up in prison themselves. They also can't torture people. It's a waste of time and it makes them a lot of enemies. So if the Mafia wants to dispense justice, they have to do it their own way. They can't just copy the police or the courts, and in some ways that makes them more fair. They don't have to deal with things like reasonable doubt or evidence or witnesses. If they think someone's guilty, they punish them. No questions asked. But at the end of the day, that's not really justice. It's just vigilantism. And no matter how satisfying it might be to see on TV, it's not something we should aspire to in real life. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. The Mafia isn't some kind of magical crime-fighting organization, or just a bunch of thugs with guns. But what if they weren't? What if the Mafia was a bunch of superheroes instead? Well, that's a story we'll leave for another time. Maybe if the Mafia were superheroes, they wouldn't have to worry about things like evidence and witnesses. They could just rely on their superpowers to dispense justice. Now that would be interesting. What do you think? Would you rather live in a world where the Mafia were superheroes, or where everyone followed the Constitution? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See you next time.